The last section of Bhagavatam I was reading from is Kapila Dev's teachings on devotional service. So 3.25.25. 3.25.25. Satam prasangan mamavirya samvidho. Satam prasangan mamavirya samvidho. Bhavanti rit karna rasayana kata. Bhavanti rit karna rasayana kata. Tajjoshanat ashpa pavarga vartmani. Tajjoshanat ashpa pavarga vartmani. Shraddha ratir bhaktir anukramishati. Shraddha ratir bhaktir anukramishati. Translation: in the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begin, which is an interesting phrase, like what was going on before. Let's hear Srila Prabhupada's report. The process of advancing in Krishna consciousness and devotional service is described here. The first point is that one must seek the association of persons who are Krishna conscious and to engage in devotional service. Without such association, one cannot make advancement. Simply by theoretical knowledge or study, one cannot make any appreciable advancement. I said it twice. One must give up the association of materialistic persons and seek the association of devotees, because, one more time, without the association of devotees, one cannot understand the activities of the Lord. Generally, people are convinced of the impersonal feature of the absolute truth because, one more time, they do not associate with devotees. They cannot understand that the absolute truth can be a person and have personal activities. This is a very difficult subject matter. The sixth time. Short paragraph. And unless one has personal understanding of the absolute truth, there's no meaning to devotion. Service or devotion cannot be offered to anything impersonal. Service must be offered to a person. Non-devotees cannot appreciate Krishna consciousness by reading the Srimad Bhagavatam or any other Vedic literature wherein the activities of the Lord are described, semicolon. They think that these activities are fictional, manufactured stories, because spiritual life is not explained to them in the proper mood. To understand the personal activities of the Lord, one has to seek the association of devotees. Sixth time. And by such association, when one contemplates and tries to understand the transcendental activities of the Lord, the path of liberation is open and he is freed. One who has firm faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead becomes fixed, and his attraction for association with the Lord and the devotees increases. Association with devotees means association with the Lord. The devotee who makes this association develops the consciousness for rendering service to the Lord. And then, being situated in the transcendental position of devotional service, you gradually become perfect. This is Kapila Dev's teachings. The whole section, broad section, is Sankhya. Sankhya has its place in Bhagavad Gita also. Several sections are Sankhya sections of Bhagavad Gita. Because Sankhya is a basis or foundation for understanding what's what, for understanding tattva. The tattva-vit, the one who's the knower of tattva, has a knowledge of Sankhya. So, in simple terms, Sankhya is count. Sankhya. Categories of matter, categories of spirit. We belong to the category of spirit, and there are stages of spiritual perfection, or the jiva, then Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. So the stages more complete than another on the tattva of the absolute truth. So that Kapila is known for Sankhya Yoga, explaining in great detail. That's a previous chapter. The heart of the Sankhya section of these 6-7 chapters, chapter 26. And in that Sankhya section, he describes the unfolding of creation or material elements, and then creation by Lord Brahma, from subtle to gross, but that the source of the subtle and then in turn the gross is the absolute truth, or the source, the absolute truth, meaning that which is the source of everything. That's the absolute truth. Say it the other way. The absolute truth is that from which everything comes. Atata Brahma Jigyasa from Vedanta Sutra. Human form of life is meant for inquiry into understanding that from which everything comes. Say it negatively. If one doesn't make such an inquiry, he remains below the human form of life. One may have 2 legs and 2 arms and a head, thus like a human form, but it's not human from the Vedic point of view without that inquiry. Inquiry, and where does everything come from? So those that inquire, that Sankhya is there. This is where everything comes from, and this is how the things that come from that source unfold one by one by one. And the understanding is cause and effect. Just like, experimentation. If you wiggle something over here, and then you see something over there wiggle, there's the cause and there's the effect. And then keep going, and here's the original cause. And all the effects are because of movements from the original cause. This is a transformation of that. This is connected to that. Everything is connected to the source of everything. And then to understand the source of everything, this verse is pointing out 6, 7 times. To understand the source of everything is a person requires association of one who knows or has realization that the source of everything is a person. And that way of understanding that the source of everything is a person is identified in Bhagavad Gita and so many other places, here included, that by bhakti. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyas-chasmi tattvata. There's this word tattva again. To understand tattvataha in truth, there's one method. And that one method is bhakti. Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyas-chasmi tattvata. Krishna can be understood, he declares in Bhagavad Gita, by bhakti. And you can say it negatively. Without bhakti, one can't understand him. That's what Prabhupada is saying 6 times in the purport. Without bhakti, one cannot understand him. One will understand something, and that something that one may understand is the impersonal feature. Everything comes from Brahman. But what is Brahman? It's the sort, besides it's the source of things. What is Brahman? Then to understand what is Brahman, bhakti provides the facility for understanding what is Brahman. It's from Parabrahman. And Parabrahman is a person. Who can understand that? Those that have bhakti have it. And those who have bhakti can give bhakti. Last week, I was in central New Jersey, a little distant from Texas. We spent a week discussing one book that this verse is a kind of summary of. And the book is called Madhurya Kandamini, and it's a detailed, not super detailed, but reasonably detailed description of the stages of the unfolding of the stages of bhakti, really. Bhakti lata, the creeper of bhakti, from beginning, intermediate, and mature stage. 9 stages. So this is presenting in one verse those 9 stages. And how does bhakti start? So it simply, it starts with some preliminary faith. Preliminary faith in what? Because everybody has faith in something. Whole chapter in Bhagavad Gita. Divisions of faith. Everybody has faith in something. Why? Because faith is of the soul. That makes it really simple. Because it's of the soul, everyone has it. So if we don't have faith in the Supreme, we have faith in something. Through the modes of nature. Divisions of faith are according to the modes of nature. And some have this, that, the other faith, but because faith is of the soul, there's faith. So preliminary faith everyone has. And some persons, their preliminary faith says that there's a higher reality. That means this is not everything. This is here, it's real, but it's not everything. So, and where does this come from? That's, I have faith that this comes from something, some place. It's reasonable, but it's also, it takes a little bit of faith, because someone could say, no, there's no meaning, life has no meaning. There's this little children's rhyme, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. You know this one? Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. There's no meaning. Life has no meaning. Just row your boat, and it's just a dream. So, but others have an understanding, no, it's not just, it's a dream, it's real. But where does, even if it's a dream, where does the dream come from? Like, what's the source? It's a thoughtful question, or a sign that your light's on. It's a sign that there's intelligence operating. You're asking questions, jigyasa. Brahma Jigyasa. I want to know that was the source. So some people are asking that question, and that's the preliminary faith. And then the next step or next stage of the unfolding of bhakti is meeting someone who has bhakti. I'm not going to give the whole class, it took a whole week, but that stage of moving from I have some faith, when one gets the opportunity of association of devotee, sadhu, because there are different definitions of sadhu, but the Hatmanas tamam parta diving prakrtima shata vadanti ananya manasa gyatva bhuta namavyayam. The one of the definitions in Bhagavad Gita of sadhu is one who has taken shelter of diving prakriti, the spiritual potency of the Supreme Lord. That's a devotee. The spiritual potency of the Supreme Lord. That's the spiritual potency, that's Radharani. The pleasure potency of the Supreme Lord is Radharani. Or the other division, the Swarup Shakti, of which she is one portion, one who has taken shelter of the spiritual potencies of Krishna, that's a devotee. Because Radha bestows bhakti, or representatives of Radha bestow bhakti. So that's sadhu sangha. Then the next step is described here also. What is, when you're with sadhus, what do? You do what sadhus do. That's what you do. And bhajana kriya, activities of bhajan, particularly starting with Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing and chanting, remembering Vishnu. That's what sadhus do, bhajana kriya. So on the strength of that bhajana kriya, that's the third stage, then something further starts to happen. What's that? Coverings of consciousness gradually become diminished. And when the coverings become diminished, the pure consciousness within becomes more prominent. And progressively one starts to realize the answer to your original question, like where does everything come from? And that's what it's outlined in the purport. The emphasis that Prabhupada gives in the purport is without the association of sadhu, without the association of devotees, then one isn't going to understand the personal nature of the absolute truth. It just remains, there's a source, and the source is, whatever the source, the conception is, commonly Brahman, at least in Sanskrit terminology. What's Brahman? It's Brahma Jyoti. It's the light. Very good. And where does the light come from? The light is an aspect of something. There's light. Or sun rose this morning at 7:27. So before it was the sunrise, it was dark. So the light that comes from the sun comes from the sun. So the sun is the source of the light of the sun, and the Brahman has a source, Para-Brahman. I mean, it's logic, but it's also scriptural. And then what's the nature of Para-Brahman? So to understand the nature of Para-Brahman, one requires association of devotees. And who is a devotee? One who has had association with devotees and engaged in the Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam process. And when so that means to say they have some understanding, greater or lesser, of the absolute truth being a person. Because service without person is a non-existent. There's a word, it doesn't mean anything. So service means person. Bhakti yoga means a person. It must be. Three things: servitor, the served, and the interaction between the servitor and the served. Both is mutual interaction. There must be personal. But to understand that person, the medium is bhakti, and without bhakti is made possible by association with sadhu, and that's the verse. Let's go back to Sanskrit of this verse, text 25. Satam Sangha, Sangha, association, prasanga, through association, prasanga. Satam, this is those who are attached to Sat are the Satam, the devotees. Satam prasangam mama virya samvidho. Mama virya. Virya here is translated, it means strength, but Krishna's wonderful qualities. Mama virya. Samvidho. Vid and samvid. One has discussions and some awakening of knowledge, samvid, of those activities. Mama virya samvidho. And so that's the bhajana kriya activity. And bhavanti rit karna, both the heart and the ear, rasayana. Rasayana means enjoyment, but it also means it's like medicine. It's an Ayurvedic medicine, rasayana. It's medicine for the soul, medicine for the ear and the heart. Rasayana, kata. So it's kata that's like medicine, and it's very pleasing to the ear and to the heart. That's the effect that, as coverings become removed and dormant consciousness becomes awakened, then there's a happiness. Let's do this one. We had a whole class. During this past weekend, I was in Vizianagari. One of the topics was the final topic, helping new people. These are all really new people from many different backgrounds. Attachment, detachment, the concept. Healthy detachment, healthy attachment. So one of the teachings of Buddhism, some of you may know, the root cause of suffering is, according to Buddha, desire. Right? You're familiar? Yes, a little bit. The root cause of suffering is desire. The Vedic understanding is the root cause of suffering is ignorance. Because, like faith, desire is of the soul. So you can't stop desire. You can't stop existing. The soul is eternal. There's spiritual desire in relation to the absolute truth. Loving service, that's a spiritual desire. So desire is of the soul, faith is of the soul, but it's misdirected. And it's misdirected by coverings, the covering of ignorance. So it goes like this. The Vedic conception is the root cause of suffering is ignorance, because ignorance induces ignorant desire. From ignorant desire comes ignorant activity. From ignorant activity comes suffering. Therefore, the root cause of suffering is ignorance, not desire. So what's needed is to purify desire by removal of ignorance. Very simple. So there's knowledge, the Vedas. Through the Vedas, one can remove ignorance and then have real desire. And that real desire in its mature stage is loving service to the source of everything. And then we have association of others that are doing some similar thing. Like-minded souls engaged in hearing Shravanam Kirtanam Or in this verse, it's Mama Virya Sambhito, hearing the descriptions of the what glorious activities of the personality of Godhead. So this is the personality of Godhead, Kapila Dev, giving the teachings of how one can know him, or one can know the absolute truth. I'll just say one more thing. I'm going to abruptly end. The one more thing is the context. This is chapter 25. The discussion began several chapters back. At the beginning of chapter 25, Devahuti, who is Kapila Dev's mother, is asking him a question. The question is, I have too much attachment. And that attachment is causing me misery. So how do I become free from attachment? It's causing that attachment, not spiritual, but material attachment that's causing me misery. And his answer, that was the first verse of chapter 25. The second verse, he says, by sadhusanga. And then he unpacks that statement. By sadhusanga means this. In the association, satam prasankam mavavirya sambhito. In the association of sadhus, you do bhajana kriya. And through bhajana kriya, anartha nivritti, the unwanted becomes cleansed. Anartha nivritti, the unwanted becomes cleansed. And when the unwanted becomes cleansed, something's left. The soul that's not covered with ignorance. And then it moves quickly. Steady, taste, attachment, but then it's a spiritual asakti, the spiritual attachment. The material attachment is replaced by spiritual attachment. Because attachment isn't a problem, material attachment is the problem. Or attachment rooted in ignorance is the problem. We're not meant to give up natural affection. That's not the recommendation of Vedic culture. But attachment that's rooted in ignorance, that's unwholesome. It causes suffering. Every time, it's just a law of nature. Not blaming anybody, it's just a law of nature. And so what to do? Purify the mind and the heart. How? Sadhusanga, bhajana kriya, hearing topics of the personality of Godhead, and then Tajjoshanat Ashpa Apavarga Vartani. Apavarga Vartma. Vartma means path, and the path of liberation. Apavarga. The path of material existence is Pavarga. Some of you know little Sanskrit. Pa-pa-pa-pa-ma. Pavarga. Material existence. And Apavarga is liberation. The path of liberation is open. Liberation from what? Liberation from ignorance. And then sequence, Shraddha, Ratir. Rati is a nice word. Rati is another name for bhava or ecstasy. Here Prabhupada is translated as attraction. Bhakti anukramishati. And one by one, these stages of it's like a plant, or using the metaphor of Rupa Goswami, is a creeper. As the creeper grows, then things start to happen. Leaves come, then eventually more leaves come, then eventually little buds come, and then little flowers come, and then the fruit comes, the mature stage. the fruit of love of God and the Pramishiti. That's nice. This is the stages of Bhakti in the capsule verse. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. While you're considering, I'd like to use your restroom. Where's your? This is your home? You can show me where? You think it's a nice question?
Hare Krishna devotees online. If you have any questions, please write to us. We will read your questions. Devotees in the room. Yeah, please think of a nice question. Okay.
How do they increase the spiritual desire? I know the association will increase the spiritual desire. But when I'm associating with other devotees, of course, it is there. But after coming home and reading Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, it is there. But why I'm not able to continuously do that?
Any other question?
Yeah, also the significance of our work, that part I think fully follow.
You can ask that. Any other question? So,
What was the question, Prabhuji? I missed it.
Power, the significance I didn't understand.
the difference.
Yes.
Another question? Vishnu, you should have a question.
Yes.
Thinking?
I want others to answer.
Okay. So first Kamarayana Prabhu, second Radham Prabhu, third Vishnu.
Any question?
Then let me go to the sequence. Tesh Prabhu, you want a question?
No.
You have a question? So, you want to say no or later?
He already answered it when I will be quiet.
Okay. What was the question?
Like basically one asked how much is association? Like how do we know what
What is the right?
what is the right
level?
amount of association?
Very good. Very good question. Any question? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So there are 4 questions in the room.
Really?
Yes.
Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the class. My question is, you said to increase the spiritual desire, we need to have association with devotees. Yes, whenever I am associating with the devotees, that desire is there. But after coming home, reading the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, it's there, but I'm not able to continually, increase the desire. Again, it goes to the material desire. So how do I, retain that?
It's gradual. Stay with it. I call it the bungee cord effect or the sine curve effect. So that's the down is there's residual stuff, anartas, and they pull like a bungee cord. So why and what to do? Why? Because of long-standing affinity for matter. Who can say how long? And who can say how thick? Long-standing affinity for matter. Vasana in the Sanskrit. Tendencies, very deep-rooted tendencies. So that's why. Now what to do? Continue in the process of sadhana, or the bhajana kriya, another way of saying sadhana is bhajana kriya, in the association of devotees and when you're not in the physical association of devotees. In other words, when you're just chanting japa or when you're reading Bhagavatam or other scriptures, you're associating with Vyasadeva, you're associating with Prabhupada in his Bhaktivedanta purports, or you're associating with Krishna through the message of Bhagavad Gita. So it's sadhusanga is there, but consciousness, due to long-standing conditioning, it gets filtered out. So as the filter gets cleansed, then it becomes more transparent. Successively, anukramishati.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hare Krishna to Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Maharaj, I would like to understand the difference and significance of varga, pavarga and apavarga. I think you mentioned it, but I was not very clear.
What's the terms? What's in what?
Apavarga,
Artha? Oh, pavarga and apavarga.
yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Well, simple terms. A means not, and pavarga is material existence. So Prabhupada, I've heard this maybe 50 times, maybe more. Pa, parishrama, hard work. Pa, foam in the mouth. Pa, 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 pa is faina, foam in the mouth. Pa, 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 fear. Ma, death. Pa, 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 ma. Material existence, hard work, foam in the mouth, fear, death. I'm missing one, but anyway, there's 5. So that's material existence. Pavarga, step back besides the declension from Sanskrit grammar, it's material existence. Endeavor, intense endeavor to get something, fruitive work. Do something to get something, material existence, fruitive work. We're the soul. We really don't have anything to do with Prakriti, except it's awarded to us because we want to enjoy separately from Krishna. So we're given the opportunity to enjoy separately from Krishna by having Prakriti, material Prakriti, to do fruitive work. That's pavarga. And, it leads to death. Doesn't lead to what real happiness is. So, pavarga means, no, I don't want to do this anymore. So there's different ideas of what apavarga is. One is negation, karma sannyas. All these things are detailed in Bhagavad Gita, but higher than karma sannyas is absorption in Brahman, absorption in Parama, absorption in Bhagavan, loving service, the path of yoga. Karma yoga, Jnana yoga, Dhyana yoga, Bhakti yoga. But apavarga, all of them are transcendentalists in that it's negation of the affinity, long-standing affinity for material enjoyment. That's pavarga. Apavarga. No, apavarga. Vartmani is the path, vartma, the path of termination of the cycle of birth and death. Because the cycle of birth and death is perpetuated by the very same thing that brought us here to begin with, the desire to be a separate enjoyer. And there's no such thing. But it looks like, it's called Maya, looked like water in a desert, no such thing. But it looks like. So living entities that on the path of pavarga can be relieved. That's Devahuti's question. I have too much material attachment. How do I get relieved from it? Sadhu Sangha. So that's the meaning of pavarga and apavarga.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare
And-
Krishna.
Dandruff Nam Jai Shri Prabhupada. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. I know we should not be attached, but we are always attached to your blessings and classes. And I get delighted to host you. Thank you so much. My question is, we talked about desire in today's class, spiritual desires. But as devotees, seeing that we also develop desire to services,
To serve
and to services. My desire is to
serve and service.
yes.
Okay.
How do we contain the desire so that we do not get to lack of cooperation?
Simple. In principle, Krishna is at the center. Now, wait a minute. I have my idea of Krishna is at the center, and you have your idea of Krishna is at the center. And, as many people as there are in the room, there's that many different ideas of Krishna. What's Krishna's pleasure going to look like? So we have a conflict. Now, maybe we can work it out. And maybe we can't work it out. We start doing disrespectful things to one another, behind one's back, and different varieties of conflicts. So your question is how to avoid it.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
And
you have a qualifier.
a follow.
Let me do the first one rather than
Yes.
the follow-up.
Yes.
Yes, then we'll do the follow-up.
Sure. Thank you.
A saying that I like is there's no substitute for purity. But by that I mean, if it's really that Krishna should be pleased, that's bhakti. That's it. That's the heart of the heart. Anukulyeta Krishna Anushilanam. Krishna should be pleased. I will then recognize there are different ways to please Krishna. Because what's Krishna pleased by? Is he pleased by cherries or raspberries? Or rice or chapatis? Or rasgulla or sandesh? And he's pleased by the love and devotion with which things are offered, not just raspberries or cherries. Isn't he? So there's if I have come to the point of genuinely accepting, bhakti means to the intention to please Krishna. There can be varieties of ways to please Krishna, and therefore I can respect the bhakti within, although the shape of it may look a little different than mine, but that's good. Prabhupada calls this unity in diversity. It's a really nice little room conversation with Professor O'Grady from Ireland. Professor, And he's, how do you deal with clashes, conflict? Prabhupada said unity and diversity. Then he gestured to a vase that was on the table. See this vase? Varieties of flowers, different colors, variety, different types of flowers, variety. And it's a much nicer vase because there's variety than if it was just one flower, one color. It's nice. But there's differences. So unity and diversity. The key is the unity part and respecting diversity part, both. Now, okay, there's diversity. Got it. But I've got people that like my brand, and this other person or persons, they like another brand, so that we get into groupism. I'm familiar. So, how to not get into groupism? Like-mindedness is natural, but let us not be disrespectful of the bhakti that's within another person or group of persons that wish to serve. And, respectfully, because it's not pleasing to Krishna that there's clash. So let me bring that pitch down and emphasize the unity while respecting diversity and considering it pleasing to Krishna, that there is diversity and to respect diversity. Now that takes purity. That's my, there's no substitute for purity. Supposing I'm not pure, then my way is the right way, because that's why I've chosen my way, because it's the right way. And if you haven't chosen my way, it's not the right way. Then comes the clash or conflict. So it takes purity, or another way, it takes maturity. And the maturity or the purity is, the essence is, Krishna is to be pleased. So let me not create or participate in the conflict part, the diversity part, overemphasis on the way that we were discussing it twice this past weekend, was form over substance. And the form was the graphic was an iceberg. And there's the tip of the iceberg, that part of an iceberg that's above the surface of the water. And then there's a big part of the iceberg that's below the surface of the water. What's below the surface of the water is the real I and the real sense of what pleasing Krishna is, the real bhakti. And then the form is what it looks like. When there's overemphasis on form and de-emphasis on substance, then you have conflicts. And sometimes they get resolved, and sometimes they don't get resolved. Sometimes. Call material life. And it's certainly possible. We've all experienced it. Where there can be conflict in devotee sangha. And so there's the why and what to do. And there's no substitute for purity. So my position should not be pointing fingers. They're not pure yet. You point the finger inside and say, I'm not pure yet. That's what to do. Make the heart pure. What does that look like? And then, you should know what it looked like. In simple terms, unity and diversity. The heart of bhakti. Krishna is to be pleased. And then second part of your question, follow up.
Thank you, Maharaj. You know that I'm a very big fan of Ram Bhagwan.
You're what?
I'm a big fan of Ram.
You're a fan
Sri
of
Ram.
Ram?
Yes.
I know lots of people that they're big fans.
But with that comes a weakness, and that's my understanding. So please excuse my offenses. I have low tolerance for some things. Like a perceived lack of ethics, lack of trust, uh, or let's say manipulation. And I know in bhakti, if I have to advance, I have to be more tolerant.
Yeah.
Uh, but
So-
then this low tolerant on these factors makes me less tolerant to some things. Um, and then I say, okay, I've lived a life following Ram's ethics, and now what do I do? I know I need to be more tolerant, but in such situations, I cannot be. How do I get to a state where
There's no substitute for purity. You know, place devotion to Ram at the center. And someone who has, this is Sugriva to Ram about Vibhishan. I don't trust him. And then Ram gives nice explanation. And I still don't trust him. He could harm you. Let this fellow, and he's got motives, and he's been in bad association. And suppose we let him in our company, and then he can harm you. And then Ram made clear that one. He can't harm me. And he gave his explanation of his virya. And then he gave an explanation of compassion. So you become a follower of Ram by taking on his qualities, by hearing his message to one whose heart, it's Ram consciousness, but it's filtered with not understanding what Ram wants. So being intolerant is not what Ram wants. And so purity for you is, let me become Ram conscious. Let me become fixed in imbibing the mood of my worshipable Lord and his dear devotee Hanuman. That's how. And Hanuman understood, because all this back and forth and different. Sugriva wasn't the only one. Different persons saying, don't do it for different reasons. And they, finally, Hanuman, what do you think? And he was quiet, but then he said, he's already accepted him. I know my master. So, on this topic of tolerance, he doesn't see the form. He sees the substance. So become like that. Become Hanuman-like, or Dasya, the servant of Ram. And that's the course correction. Supposing, using a worldly example, supposing you got a GPS and you missed a turn, what happens? It gives the course correction because you have the destination fixed. There's your answer. What's the destination? My life is meant for pleasing Ram. And he has this character, he's given these teachings. So you immerse yourself in Ramayana in such a manner that it enters your heart. And you're guided by that instead of by the intolerance. Form over substance.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisance.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, we spoke about association today.
Yes.
So, what is the practical, how much do we associate?
How much?
Do we associate? How do we know what's the right limit? Are we
Are
associating?
you speaking quantitative or qualitative?
Both, Maharaj. How do I know I'm doing my best?
Well, two things. It's a time management question because that's how much. That's quantitative. And that means you have other duties in your life, and what your duties in life are, you can't neglect in favor of you don't neglect. then it becomes a time management question. And one of the things that you'll learn, you probably have learned already, it's right in Ishopanishad. Many people, Prabhupada writes, that when they're asked to serve Krishna, they say they have no time. And come to do, sadhu sangha, I don't have time. And Prabhupada's explanation is, it's true, because the material energy works in such a way that if you turn away from him, you'll have so much to do you won't have time. This materialistic life, it's turning attention away from Krishna. It's darkness. You turn away from light, it's darkness. So for you, or for any one of us, take your responsibilities seriously, and with time management, you'll understand how you can do them efficiently. I just had Sunday, I had about a 40-minute discussion with a college freshman entering into his second year. And he has a time management issue because he becomes obsessively something about, so that, it doesn't have time. So I had this long discussion about time management. So when you're doing your worldly duties or you're doing your devotional duties, do them efficiently. That efficiently means with absorption. We'll say it the opposite. If you're distracted, you're doing something, but your mind is elsewhere. If you're focused when you're doing something, you're present. And when you're present, it becomes efficient, doesn't become protracted. Then you can say it's qualitative, but it's not necessarily qualitative. So when you're absorbed in, let's say, whatever it is, your work or your family or the kitchen or cleaning or whatever it is that make up your duties of life, same with sadhu sangha. So because when cleansing goes on, this is the heart cleansing, the anarjana vritti, the clutter, little by little by little by little, a new kramishati gets cleared. And then there's more focus and more qualitative, then that starts to move the quantitative. Because my sense of my duties in life may also become accomplished more quickly, more efficiently, more effectively. And some things will just fall away because they're not really essential. But not artificially, naturally. As bhakti grows through sadhu sangha, so your question is qualitatively and quantitatively, but mainly quantitatively. Sadhu sangha. Just make sure it's just a regular part of what you do. And also consider, like this other example of reading, is sadhu sangha. The more that you have a sense of these persons who have written their literatures, Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta purports, or Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's description of Rupa Goswami's 9 stages of bhakti, it's sadhu sangha. And you feel it. I mean, the potential is there, the potency is there to feel it. And then it's also sadhu sangha. So you do time management, so much time for chanting, so much time for reading, so much time for gatherings, and then time management, and do it, be very present. And then when you're doing the other things, you can do them efficiently and effectively without dilly-dallying or what happens when the mind gets distracted. And getting caught in the complexities of conflicts in situations that really are not necessary, but take time. Anything else?
Thank you, Maharaj. That was a very wonderful answer.
Okay.
I think that's all from Maharaj.
Okay.
No more questions.
What?
No questions online.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prabhupada Ki.
His Holiness Prabhupada Maharaj ki.
Jai.